Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman, and it is officially happening. What they said could never possibly happen. Locked on Packers, the Pack a Day podcast. This is like Marvel and DC joining at the hip. I'm only saying that facetiously because we've done this so many times, Peter, but it still feels amazing. Everyone, please join me in welcoming the one and only Peter Bukowski. You can follow him on Twitter at Peter_Bukowski, of course, of Locked on Packers and the Leap fame. Peter, how the heck are you doing?
I'm good. I'm busy. I'm glad that we get to break down a win and a game this weekend that should be even more fun than Monday night.
I think that's 1,000,000% true. Before we get into all of that, we take care of our guests here first. So you just launched The Leap with Jason Hirschhorn, which I just realized he has two H's in his last name. There are three H's, but the double H is really throwing me off, and I don't appreciate that. But other than that, you guys have been off to just a ridiculous, like it's an unfair start is what I'm going to call it, because you guys have hit the ground running so ridiculously fast. You had a great article with Mike Wall, but for my listeners who I'm sure probably are aware, but some who may not be, tell us about The Leap and what you've been working on so far.
Yeah, so The Leap is about trying to bring sort of an elevated discussion to fans, because I think that there is certainly a space, and I think the work that you do, the work hopefully that I do, that people like our friend Dusty Evely does, says that there are people out there who want insight, not just the hey, the coach said this, hey, Roger said this, hey, people are saying this. They want something that is more about explaining what's going on. Why is this happening? What is the problem with the third down defense? What's going on in the red zone? Why is Kevin King? I don't know that we have a good answer for that last one, but
why is Kevin King?
We try and parse that. And so I think that's the goal here. And also, we've been lucky that, someone like Mike Wall wanted to be a part of doing. Hopefully that is something that we get to do a lot more of. We want to bring the player's perspective, coach's perspective. We've heard from Kenny Clark's trainer, and there's already been some reporting. Jason Hirschhorn had a scoop earlier in the process. He was all over a training camp signing that the Packers made. So there's a lot there. I appreciate you letting me pump it a little bit. And if people can go check it out, Mondays are free. We have a $36 annually gets you access. It's $6 a month. So if you do the math, easy call, but by the year, $3 a month, that's less than a latte a month, Andy. So we think it's worth it. And we hope people will check it out.
If you figure out why is Kevin King, I will give out a free subscription right here on the Pack a Day podcast. We will pump it up next time you're on. Once you figure out why is Kevin King, we'll dive into that in much greater detail. But no, this is awesome to have you on. I'm excited. This is going to be likely about an every other week occurrence, right across from Ty Dunn, which has been great as well. But let's jump in. We've got a ton to discuss. I actually only asked you about The Leap, so we didn't have to talk about Locked on Packers. That was my excuse. No, I'm just kidding. But let's talk about this last game. And let's start on the fun side. Let's start with the offensive side of the ball, which I think Ben Fennell deemed, and I think everyone can safely deem, the return of the Matt LaFleur offense. We had a beautiful horizontal passing game. We had amazing red zone creativity. We had Rodgers getting the ball out of his hands quickly. All of that's amazing, and it's great to see back. What were your biggest takeaways from the offense this past week?
I think, the return of the Matt LaFleur offense was the big one. The pre-snap motion, all of a sudden that's back. The personnel creativity, all of a sudden that's back. We got Pony, which Zach Cruz and I have decided we're going to be calling Lil Sebastian package from now on. So that's what we're going with. That's the stuff that you want to see, right? That was the stuff that was absent from week one. And I said that it was the most puzzling game plan that I can remember from Matt LaFleur in a while. I mean, I think going back to 2019 would probably be the last time you're just like, what exactly was the thought process here with the Saints game? And the only conclusion that I can come to is they just didn't think they had to be that creative to beat this team. And hopefully that if that is the case, that they've moved on from that. We saw the real Matt LaFleur offense, and we saw the real Aaron Rodgers. And I appreciated Rodgers saying, I did not play in rhythm in week one. I held the ball too long, and the offense was not in rhythm because I wasn't in rhythm, and I wanted to get the ball out a little bit faster. And he completed 80% of his passes when he got the ball out in under 2.5 seconds, according to Pro Football Focus. I mean, the difference is huge. And the last thing, the offense was 3 players. It was Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Davante Adams. When those are your guys, make sure they have opportunities to beat opposing defenses, find ways to create opportunities for them, and you're going to have success because those guys are as good as anybody else at their position. And when you give them a chance to succeed, they will, against not just the Lions. I get it was just the Lions, but that formula, that works against anybody.
Yeah, you have 2 alphas in Aaron Jones and Davante Adams, and you've got a fantastic complementary player in Robert Tonyan, which I thought he was perfect in that role. And I talked to Rachel Hotmeyer about this right after the game. I give a ton of credit to the rest of the guys in this roster. Now, MVS probably should have had a couple of big plays if Rodgers and MVS can just connect on a couple of those. I think more Rodgers than MVS, frankly. But everyone else, Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, even AJ Dillon was blocking on a couple plays for Aaron. And Rachel and I were talking, like, all of those guys were alphas at one point in time, whether at high school, whether most of them like Alan Lazard at Iowa State. For all of them to buy into that offense and not be the guy. Mercedes Lewis is again the picture boy for that. But
former first round pick, Andy.
What's that?
Former first round pick.
Exactly. So all of those guys buying in and not having to get 10 passes thrown their way to still be successful in this offense. And as you perfectly put it, when it's in the hands of Davante Adams and when it's in the hands of Aaron Jones, great things are happening. I think the great thing about Jones is this is not just a running back. You're not just handing him the football. We saw how dangerous he can be in the passing game. We saw him against the Chiefs a couple of years back where he takes basically a wide receiver screen. What was it, like 70 yards for a touchdown? Mm-hmm. We saw him last year. I forget who it was against, but on the deep ball in the end zone where he had to make the adjustment. He's such a weapon. And the more that the offense is involving him, the better this offense is.
Yeah, and go back to a different play in the Chiefs game, right? I mean, he not only did he had the receiver screen, he had the sluggo touchdown where he stepped out of bounds that got called back, but it's a touchdown. Let's call it what it was.
Yep.
And then on the play to seal the game, they called a 3rd and medium little out route for him from the slot, and he caught it, and it's the game over. That's something that we didn't see as much last year because they didn't need it. And I love that as a counter for Matt LaFleur saying, okay, the stuff we were trying last week didn't work out. Let's go back to some stuff that we know is just our bread and butter. We know Aaron Jones against a linebacker is barbecue chicken. Like that's going to win against Jamie Collins, who is not just a step slow. He's 2 or 3 steps slow. I mean, they victimized Jamie Collins. And then the report yesterday from Ian Rappaport is the Lions are trying to trade him and they're doing the right thing. He's a veteran. They want to give him a chance to win. It's like, no, that guy was terrible on Monday, and that's why they want to move on.
And the game before too.
Right. They embarrassed Jamie Collins with Aaron Jones. And I think that is a sustainable thing moving forward. This is not something that gets talked about a lot. And I don't say it to criticize Aaron Jones, really. But Aaron Jones' worst game as a pro was in the NFC Championship game.
Yep.
And he got hurt. And who knows how that game is different if he's regular Aaron Jones, if he's the Aaron Jones that he'd been really his whole career, but especially 2019, 2020. He has the fumble, he has a drop, and then he gets hurt. And it's just, and the fumble leads directly to a touchdown in a moment when the Packers were trying to put together some momentum to get back in the game. He has a great opportunity to be a focal point of this offense. And I'm really excited to see them continue to mix and match because this is a team that with Aaron Rodgers, they don't have to rely on, this supreme talent all over the field. All these guys are great. Davante Adams is an alpha, as you said. Aaron Jones is an alpha. Everyone else, they have high-level role players. MBS is great at one thing. Alan Lazard is great at one thing. Big Bob Tonyan is great at really one thing. I mean, he's athletic enough, but his one thing is he catches everything. Throw it in his area code and he will come down with it. And the offensive line has been playing well. So that's a great formula for a successful offense. And I have a take that I've still got in the holster, Andy. Wait till we're going to get to it later. And I don't know if you're ready for the take, but I think there's some interesting things coming and I can't wait to see it.
I cannot wait for the take. We're going to get to that momentarily. Before we get there, I want to switch over to everyone's favorite side of the football, defense. There was so much of a to-do about this Joe Barry, Matt LaFleur halftime discussion where Matt LaFleur wanted Joe Barry to be a bit more aggressive, and then we saw it be more aggressive and it worked. And of course, this means that Matt LaFleur knows exactly what he's talking about, and Joe Barry doesn't know anything that he's talking about. And of course, the internet had a field day with this. Aaron Nagler did a great job parodying this as well. But what was your takeaway from this discussion, really on Twitter, this past day or so?
This is why we can't have nice things, Andy. This is exactly it, because so what's funny is initially I saw the quote and I was just like, that's not great. It's not great. And I think more it was not great from a messaging standpoint, because I don't think Matt LaFleur meant it the way that he said it.
Agreed.
After I rewatched the game, and I wonder if you had the same impression, they got caught at times in between. There were times when they played that umbrella coverage and there was nothing behind them, and Jared Goff has to check down and they rally to the ball and they tackle. And they actually did a pretty good job by and large in those situations. And then there were times when they were aggressive. They brought, I don't know if you caught this, they brought Kevin King off the slot. I don't think in Kevin King's career, go back to high school, I bet he's never slot blitzed. Those are cool wrinkles. They actually had some nice blitzes and created some pressure on those pressure looks. In the second half, they started to bring more 5-man pressures. Where they struggled was, okay, we're going to rush 4 and play man. We're going to rush 4 and play 2 deep. Or we're going to play single high robber and man. And the 4-man rush could not get home. And so what I think LaFleur was saying was, look, if you're going to play coverage, and really the 2 deep safeties with the 4-man rush, that's coverage, really.
Yep.
Because you're not consistently going to get home with 4. If we're going to do that, then really just play coverage, play the 2 shell, play the quarters, and make them check it down. Don't give them an opportunity to create a big play on a second reaction play like the Kevin King play, or, even the Jared Goff zone read play was because they were man coverage and they apparently knew they were going to get that look, or thought they were going to get that look. They send the receiver on a go, and Jared Goff runs for his longest run in his career. You can't have those things happening. Look like Colin Kaepernick out there. And I think it's more a mindset than anything, right? I mean, it's all right. We're either gonna play conservative, and here it is, or we're going to be aggressive and come after you. And I think that allowed everyone to be a little bit more sure of themselves, to play a little bit faster. And that's what I think we started to see in the second half, is guys started to fly around a little bit more. You saw the defensive front start to win a little bit more. And part of that is game script too. I think that's a lesson that is learnable for this defense. What I want to see them is make that adjustment sooner, because in both games, they started to bring pressure and it started to create opportunities for their defense. If you can't bring, if you're 2 drives in and your 4-man rush is not getting home, if you're a drive and a half in this case, because a drive and a half in both games is like 20 plays.
Seriously.
Then you have to make some adjustments on the fly a little bit sooner. And they just haven't been able to do that yet. So we'll see if that's something that can change. I have to say, I don't have a lot of hope against Kyle Shanahan that that's going to happen. I think the Packers offense is going to have to be their best defense in this game. I don't know. What did you think changed in the second half for them?
I thought they were a bit more aggressive. I agree with you. I think they did get caught in no man's land a little bit in the first half. I think the biggest thing that I kind of wanted to go over here, though, was basically the fact that I feel like this is very healthy, especially in game 2 of a new defensive coordinator and a head coach, and having that open line of communication, going through that process. I'm sure they're both still kind of getting on a philosophical, the same philosophical wavelength. And if you're the head coach, and every head coach will take the criticism after and say, ultimately at the end of the day, everything reports up to me and I got to take ownership of that. But, if he sees something and he's not having that conversation, then he's not doing his job as a head coach. So I thought this was all very healthy. I don't think it was necessarily indicative that Joe Barry was, even necessarily doing anything wrong. I just think Matt LaFleur spotted something. It was an easy conversation. I thought they were a bit more aggressive in the second half, didn't get caught in no man's land quite as well, or quite as much. And At the end of the day, though, whether it was a philosophical approach that changed, what changed in the second half was that they were ahead. They were significantly ahead, and Detroit became predictable. And that makes it so much easier.
And Jared Goff has baby hands.
And you talked about it before. Like, he doesn't want to get moved off of his spot. Listen, Jared Goff is not a even probably good-ish. Like, he's okay, right? But if he can just stay on his spot and just deliver the ball, he's good. He's like, I'm not even going to say he's great, but he's good. But you start getting him off that spot, and then things start going to, haywire for Jared Goff. So, and Matt LaFleur knows that better than anyone because he worked with Jared Goff. So he's looking back there and he's saying, listen, this guy's kryptonite is literally moving, and we're letting him do anything that he wants. Let's change it up. Yeah. And it worked much better in the second half.
Yeah. And that was true. You go back to the NFC Championship game, same diagnosis, right? First half, they played a lot of conservative calls. Second half, they start to bring pressure. Darnell Savage, slot blitz, turns into an interception. I mean, it was like why did they wait against a guy whose passer rating dropped like 80 points, whatever misgivings you have about passer rating, and I have them, but like the numbers were clear and the tape was clear. When you blitzed Brady, or not when you blitzed him, but when you pressured him, he became a different player.
Right.
And they weren't pressuring him, and they finally started to manufacture some pressure, and they were able to make some changes there. This team, I think, needs to start from the jump going, okay, let's not rely on our 4-man rush to do this. Let's get a little more aggressive sooner in the game. And then in the second half, if we have a lead, now we can tune it up, and now we can get a little bit more creative, and now we can start doing some exotic things maybe. I just think that it's a mindset from the jump. And I do wonder about this, Andy. When you go back to the process of hiring a new defensive coordinator, Jim Leonard was the guy that Matt LaFleur wanted to hire.
Yep.
And there was no secret about that. They tried to walk it back and pretend like, oh no, he was just someone in the mix. But it's like, no.
He was the guy.
We had the reporting. He was the guy and turned it down. And that could be a significant sliding doors moment. But I do also wonder if Matt LaFleur is looking at this going, and I wonder how much guys like Brian Gutekunst and Mark Murphy have input here saying, we think you can do this, Matt. We think you can take a bigger role in all of this. Find someone that you think is smart and capable, and go in and make sure you can be a voice in that room. Remember, Matt LaFleur inherited Mike Pettin.
Right.
The organization pushed for Mike Pettin to be there. Who knows how much? I think at the end, we heard that he was the one that said, "I want to play man" on that last that last first half drive that gave up the Scotty Miller touchdown. As we've said ad nauseum, it's not just a bad call; it's a bad play. But I wonder if part of Joe Barry's appeal to Matt was a comfort level, knowing that if I come to him and say, "We need to do this," that there's going to be that level of trust between coach and coach to say, okay, that there's going to be a collaborative work environment to say, okay, great, let's do that. And it sounds like that is happening currently. I don't know. I mean, when you've watched the tape, and I know you've watched it, I haven't seen a bunch of like bad schematic calls.
Right.
I've seen schematic breakdowns, and I've seen guys not be able to get off blocks up front, which is a big problem. But it's not like I'm looking at this going, what is this call? That has, to me, has not been the problem so far. But I think Dusty Evely made a great point. We were just in fact talking about this on Twitter. The thing that makes Brandon Staley so unique is his ability to communicate the why, to explain this is to teach, to be a teacher. And I think Matt LaFleur has the same trait. Aaron Rodgers talked about it.
Agreed.
And said, when I come in, I might disagree with Matt, and he's going to put something on the board and say, look, no, this is the thing. This is why. And Aaron Rodgers goes, oh, you're right. That is a specific trait that not every coach has. That's why we have to be really careful saying, oh, this guy is from this tree, and so he brings this thing. Okay, well, coaching is about so much more than that. And you just hope that some of this is just early season. We're not really communicating well. The Rams were able to do it right away. Now they had an extended offseason and all of the COVID stuff. They actually felt like that helped them in a lot of ways.
Yep.
In a lot of the same ways that it helped the Packers offense last year. So I'm interested to see how this changes and evolves going on. If it is just a matter of getting reps, I think they could end up being pretty fine, honestly, at least in the back end and from a coverage standpoint.
Yeah, the whole thing has been interesting in the fact that, obviously it looks like they wanted Leonard and then they bring in Barry. No changes really on the assistants at all. Joe Barry gets none of his guys. He has no say on anything else. Obviously, he had the relationship previously with Matt LaFleur. So you have that whole dynamic. And it's also worth pointing out, and we'll see what happens, right? But like the entire defensive coordinator crop at that point had already been wiped out because the Packers were playing in the NFC Championship game. All the teams that were done at the end of the year immediately brought their guys in. And so we'll see. There could be a short leash at the end of this year if it doesn't go well, and they could try over again next year. That wouldn't shock me. But to your point, they are still so insanely early in this process, and the lame cliche Rome wasn't built in a day. I do believe we're seeing more miscommunication breakdowns and things that are fixable over time. The defensive line getting blown off the ball, maybe not quite as fixable, but that's not a Joe Barry thing. That's as Ben Fennell likes to say, that's a Jimmy's and Joe's sort of thing. So I do want to ask you before we get away from the defense and to your hot take of the day, how would you line up these corners moving forward? If you're given the defensive coordinator play sheet and can pick who plays, how do you want to line up the corners moving forward?
Well, we saw it toward the end of the game and we ended up seeing it. I think there was some dime looks, but I couldn't tell as I was trying to chart it at the end of the game if Kevin King was just being taken off the field. But there were some times when it looked at least live, like I said, I didn't get to finish charting the game, that it was Stokes, Jair, and Chandon Sullivan on the field at once, and Chandon was playing in the slot. I think that's probably your best three, given their roles. And then I'd like to see them mix and match. I mean, I think there are games, I think there are scenarios where it actually does make sense to be playing with Stokes, King, and Jair.
Agreed.
But it's against teams who, like the Eagles a few years ago when they had Alshon Jeffrey. Like those are the matchups where you feel like, okay, Kevin King can be more useful in those matchups as a boundary corner. And if let's say it was Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson in his prime, and he's playing a bunch in the slot, then you can slide Jair Alexander. I think they can be creative in that way. And in fact, no matter what, I'd love to see them be creative in that way and match personnel a little bit more. In a game like against Minnesota, are they going to allow Jair to travel? Are they going to put him in the slot with Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen? I think those are more interesting to me than like the starting questions. The best two boundary corners on this team are Jair Alexander and Eric Stokes.
Agreed.
Figure out the rest. Honestly figure out the rest, because I do think early downs, there's a case to be made. Kevin King actually makes a pretty good slot corner in a quarters coverage. But in man, if you're playing a team with a slot receiver that has real ability, that's a problem. And if they know that that's what you're doing, either they know you're in quarters or they're going to move their best receiver into the slot like the Packers do with Devontae Adams and say, okay, cool. You want to play quarters. That's great. But if you're playing man, our guy's going to cook your guy, like, just so you know. And so that's why I just think they're in a difficult spot with this. I think their three best corners, again, it's Stokes, it's Jair, and it's Chandon Sullivan. And I think you just have to figure it out from there, because if Chandon Sullivan can be a reasonable slot corner, you don't need Jair playing in there, really.
Yep.
If he's struggling, that's when I think you can make those changes. That's how I see it. And I also think that there is a case to be made. Hey, how about some big nickel with Darnell Savage in the slot? I mean, he might be their best slot corner.
I don't hate that either. They're gonna have to figure out safety and how much they trust Henry Black, but
or Vernon Scott, who's back practicing this week.
Sure.
I mean, we'll see. I like Scott a lot, but he's probably better suited not playing, middle half or middle of the field safety. So we'll see.
We will see. I'm with you. I think matchups will dictate that, and I think actually the matchups dictated with Kevin King this past week. I thought the Lions, Quintez Cephas, TJ Hawkinson, more bigger bodied type players, even in Amon-Ra St. Brown, like those type players, I think fit well, to have Kevin King on the field. If you're facing a different offense with speedier guys, and we'll see what happens with San Fran this weekend, maybe you're not playing Kevin King.
Yeah, much tougher to do it this weekend when you could be facing Debo or Ayuk or Trent Sherfield or one of those guys, even George Kittle.
Yeah.
Like George Kittle, that big play 2 years ago in the regular season to George Kittle was on a little post corner on Kevin King, and he cooked Kevin King. So
true story.
Yeah.
All right, we need to get you out of here. Before we do so, I want to do, we need like a jingle, right? Like hot takes with Peter Bukowski. Yeah. Somebody needs to like record that and put like figure out something, but
we'll get someone on that.
What is your hot take of the day before we get out of here?
So I was rewatching the game, and as the game wore on, like MVS got a couple deep targets, but those are going to be high variance plays. And Allen Lazard, I think as the year goes on, he's going to find a role in this offense. But I was really keeping an eye on Randall Cobb because he got more snaps this week. He caught his first pass from Aaron Rodgers this week, converted 2 third downs. And I think the more comfortable he gets in this offense, I think the more Rodgers will advocate. I almost said agitate. Maybe that's also the correct word to use, but I think he will advocate for Randall Cobb. And I think the more obvious it's going to become that the Packers need some of these guys on the field who can win with their route running and not just scheme. This was the best schemed offense in the league last year. Number 1 in open receiver percentage, number 1 in wide open receiver percentage. But if teams are going to play this too high coverage, you need someone who you can get the ball out quick to, who can win quick, and then go do something with it. My hot take is that I think the number 2 receiver by preference by the end of the year is going to be Randall Cobb. That is not something that I thought was going to happen when they brought him in. I thought he was going to be marginalized, and he was marginalized in week 1. But given the way these teams are playing them with so much of this two shell, I think his ability to find spots in zones and to win early is going to be crucial in this offense. And even if he's not truly their number 2, I just think he is going to be so much more vital. I'm backing off on my hot take. I should ramp it back up. But I just think he's going to be so vital to this offense winning in January because he can be that sort of 2-deep breaker by working underneath when teams are able to find ways to bracket Davante Adams. I think this could end up being a crucial piece for them, which I know will have the quarterback smiling.
I absolutely hate this because I think I have to agree with you. I may not agree with you that he maybe ends up being like the ultimate number 2 target. I don't know. I may not disagree with you on that either, but I do think go back to the playoffs last year, right? The Tampa Bay is basically saying, we're gonna take away the run in Aaron Jones. We're gonna make sure somebody's over the top of Davante, and you're gonna have to beat us with MBS and Allen Lazard. Like that. That's the way that you're going to have to beat us. And Lazard had trouble getting off of coverage in the slot. Tampa had really good corners as well. And then they had the shot plays to MBS, and to your point, 1,000,000% high variance. They hit on 1 touchdown. They missed on a couple others, which ended up being drive killers and things that could have been explosive plays. But as we saw this past week, those are tough to convert. And Tampa basically rolled the dice a little bit and said, we don't think you can hit enough deep shots to MVS that it's going to matter. They hit 1, it wasn't enough, and Tampa Bay wins the game. I think a player like Randall Cobb in that sort of situation has a much better opportunity, maybe instead of an Allen Lazard coming across the middle, of getting off that coverage, converting third downs when Aaron Rodgers buys a little bit of time. I know we don't want to see much of that, but if he has to, Randall Cobb uncovering from that. I think he's maybe a regular, like it's in the NBA, right? Where you have a regular season guy that maybe doesn't play like all that often or isn't that much very integral to your regular season success. But come playoff time, you have to have that guy. I could 1,000,000% see Randall Cobb being that. And just based on these last couple of weeks, I think I'm fairly ready to say I want more Randall Cobb.
Look, this is not just a take that is based on like empiricism. I would like to see more Randall Cobb, and not just because it would be a fun story. I think he really does bring something different. And unfortunately, we just haven't seen anything from Amari Rodgers that suggests he can be that guy. I mean, he has just not looked like the guy that he did at Clemson. Frankly, I think that he probably needs to, I think he added weight in the offseason, some muscle, because some teams might want to play him at running back or wanted him to have that sort of positional versatility. And he just doesn't look as explosive as he did at Clemson. I think if he slimmed down a little, and maybe he can do it during the season, he can get some of that twitch back, some of that explosiveness back, and maybe give them some things that Randall Cobb would otherwise give them. But as you said, Cobb is a different kind of player than they've had, and that's why Aaron Rodgers advocated for him. I'm excited to see his progress in this offense, because with Davante and Cobb, Lazard and MVS in that 11 personnel give them a lot of versatility. And you can play Davante in the slot if you want to, but Cobb in the slot with a free release, a 2-way go. Even against the Saints, he had a play where it was the Tunyon pass interference. Cobb destroyed his guy on a whip route.
Right.
And
yep, I remember now.
Rodgers didn't throw it. And I was just like, isn't that why you brought Randall Cobb in for third? It was 4th and 3 or whatever it was. And he threw the little, it was like a slot fade or a corner or whatever it was. And they got the DPI. But I was just like, if you throw that to Randall Cobb, he might score.
It wasn't all that different than the Alan Lazard Tunyon play this week.
Where it was not that. You're right.
And then Tunyon's open or not open at all in the end zone, but Rodgers hits that. The last week they got DP, or 2 weeks ago they got defensive pass interference. This week they get the ridiculous touchdown, but
an
both
absurd
plays,
throw.
Receiver open, wide open. But yeah, you're right.
I think there's more meat on the bone with Cobb. We saw the jet sweep in the Saints game at the end of the game. I think that stuff is there. I think it's in the playbook. They're just finding their footing. And I think you're going to see Rodgers. You won't see him, but I think Rodgers behind the scenes will be going, hey, I think we can put this stuff in. I think having another guy where he can go, hey, Randall, in the middle of a game, hey, I think we should run this for Randall. Like they did with Devontae. Oh, hey, they're playing him this way. Let's throw this at them to counter that. Having another guy that he can do that with, I just think is something that both 12 and LaFleur will appreciate and be able to take advantage of.
I hate that we ended on an agreement. It's the absolute worst. We'll try to disagree more 2 weeks from now. Peter, this was amazing as always. Let us know where we can find you before we get out of here.
Peter_Bukowski on Twitter. Subscribe to The Leap at theleap.substack.com. And of course, Locked On Packers. We're on YouTube too. Followed your lead, Andy. And you can subscribe to the Locked On Packers on YouTube. Also, of course, on the podcast, anywhere you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers.
And the great thing is there is enough oxygen for all of the great Packer content out there, one of which is Peter Bukowski, of course. So make sure to follow him on Twitter. Make sure to follow Locked On Packers as well as The Leap. Peter, thank you so much for doing this. I will talk to you before 2 weeks from now, but we'll do this again in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.